Hey sellers, welcome back. This is going to be an initial recce report for a face-to-face game Dave and I are going to be playing in the next few days. It's scenario number 101, throwing down the gauntlet. It's D-Day action, so 6 June 1944 in the wee hours of the morning. It involves Canadian paras versus some reserve elements from the German Wehrmacht, mostly 447s and 436s. So not the greatest of defense, but we'll get into that as we go. So basically, the premise of the scenario is again part of the D-Day invasions. Paratroopers were dropped behind enemy lines to secure various strong points, neutralize strong points, etc. The Canadian 1st Parachute Battalion, in this case Company C, was tasked with neutralizing a strong point near the town of Airville in France, and it apparently close proximity to the landing zones for gliders and troops, so that they wanted it neutralized and dealt with, so that the Germans cannot respond and thereby destroy those landing points before they can get firmly established. It involves two map boards, 17 and 33, and it lasts 7.5 turns. So the Germans do not get a turn 8, only the Canadians get the turn 8. VC are quite simple. Basically, the Canadians have to amass 33 victory points or more. And CVP are awarded normally, as well as 3 VP if they can control the German pillbox, of which there's one in the setup area, and 1 VP per building hex, which there's 15 building hexes in the setup area as well. So calculating up the troops and the buildings and the guns, you're looking at about 44 total VP, of which the Canadians have to collect 33 or more. As it's a nighttime mission, it's probably not going to be overly difficult to kill these guys in close combat. They're relatively weak. Um, and the elite pair 648s, they're going to outnumber them in firepower alone, let alone ambush and all the rest of it that goes along with that. The only thing missing that will make the victory that much sweeter for the Canadians would probably be the presence of hand-to-hand. Just up their numbers for when you get ambush, it makes it that much easier to kill things. But such is not the case. All right, so German sets up first and the Canadians move first. So the map you can see on the left, outlined in the red area, is the German setup area. It's basically 6 hexes from Q1. As I said, there's 15 building locations, or hexes, not locations, that have to be that can be contested. Looking from a defender perspective first, we've got elements of the Boden-Standig Division, 711, setting up in the 6 hexes of 17Q1, as I said. This is what they look like. So we got 6 second line 447s. We've got 3 conscript 436s, which suck even more at night. They do have 3 leaders, so that's good, and a medium and an LMG as well, along with a mortar, which may or may not get any use. We'll see how that goes. In addition, they've got 12 minefield factors, a 75 long AT gun, and a pillbox, a 135, not to mention a couple of defensive fortifications, including foxholes and trenches. Um, it's going to be not easy for the Canadians to win, but I'm concerned about how long these guys are going to last in close combat. The 447s and the 436s are going to be outnumbered 3-2, and because their status, according to the SSR, is going to be normal, and the Canadians are going to be stealthy, the Canadians get an extra -1 on their ambush roll. So it makes it easier to ambush them, and then they're probably just going to melt away in close combat. Hopefully they'll take some Canadians along with them, but we'll see how that goes. Do have a pillbox 135 now. I'm really not sure where to put it inside the setup area. Possibly somewhere in vicinity of this road, just so that it can give you an opportunity, maybe protecting these buildings, provide some advanced cover, maybe to cover one of the approaches. Again, I'm really not sure where to put that pillbox. Right now, I'm leaning to somewhere in this area here, just again to bring cover onto these buildings for when these buildings eventually fall to the paras. The gun itself, I mean, I could set it up in the woods, maybe even in the orchard, just to mark off a certain lane. But again, I have to have a good chance of hitting something to great effect. So I'm really, again, not sure where best to put this 75 long. It is on the 75 long is on the 12th table, so that's not too bad if I can get a hit. And it has a 2 rate of fire, so that's pretty good as well. So if I can get some shots with on the 16 table, it'll do a good number of hopefully whittling down the Canadian Paris. Um, I'm looking at these buildings now. There's two clusters I see. This one down here in the east of the map, and this one here in the west of the map. I cannot defend both. I just do not have the numbers, and so I'm probably going to send a couple units here, have them set up, and then the rest will probably be guarding the majority of these buildings here, because again, he has to kill 33% or 33 VP. He has to kill, and right now there's about 20 VP and troops plus leaders. So most of that victory points has to come from the squads. Only 15 are going to come from the buildings themselves. So I'm thinking of sending a couple units forward in the west, and majority will be somewhere in this area, hopefully in advanced position so that they can start shooting and start gaining a freedom of movement. From an attacker perspective, we're looking at 9-6-4-8 para squads. They do have 3 leaders themselves, as well as a 9-2, dismantled medium, and a Piat for those troublesome building locations, which I'm sure are going to be blasted with at least one. We'll see how the Piat works. So they are all entering along the northwest or south edges. So if you look at the map, they can come in from the left, from the right, or from the top. And the stream that's depicted here, according to the SSR, is deep. So it's going to cost most of their move and CX just to get through this. And it's going to take at least a couple turns. So I don't envision the Canadians really coming through this way. If at all possible, maybe through this way or coming in through this way. Definitely down through the west, just because it's the most direct route right into these buildings. You could be within these buildings in the first turn, depending on how things move. More than likely second or third, at least these buildings are probably going to be contested, if not lost, to the Canadians. To the west, there's plenty of cover, and to the northwest, to the south, there's plenty of cover, and to the northwest, there's plenty of cover as well. Moving through this grain with an NVR of 3, which is, we'll get to the SSRs in a second. Gives them a lot of covered approaches to get close to the German setup area, and from there you can start moving forth. So I anticipate Canadians being within the red area at least by turn 3, depending on how slowly Dave takes it and which route he takes, obviously. Within turn 3 out of a possible 7.5 turns to start wiping out the Canadians, the Germans. Now, he cannot take too long because it's only 7.5 turns, and there's a lot of ground that still has to be covered. And if things go really bad, he starts to stray, combats don't go his way, it quickly becomes that much harder for him to contest and win. But that's basically what the map board's going to look like. So we have a paved road that comes through the center of the village. We have the stream to the north, which covers a nice little chunk of the map out. Again, I don't see any Canadians coming in through this way here. It just takes too long. It'd be better just to follow the river or avoid straying and come into town this way. Same with through the south, or using the roads to avoid straying as much as possible. Yeah, so I have a couple of things to set up. I'm not exactly entirely sure where to put things, especially the gun and the pillbox. There's so much to cover, I'm not sure where to put it. I can't set up mines and wire on the roads, but I can maybe put a pillbox here in T6. It would do a nice vantage point from covering this way. Or I could keep it up here in the north and help protect these cluster of buildings up here. The gun, I'm going to have to leave it somewhere back with a wide cover, either somewhere in the woods covering this way or these woods covering this way. I can maybe leave it in the building just to cover one avenue. It might make it more difficult for the Germans, but again, it's going to be hampered with where it can set up The beauty of not being in a building is I can switch my cover arc that much more easy without having to pay such crazy penalties. Although the woods themselves will be ridiculous. I can maybe just set it up on the road itself, but that's almost too open and inviting of a target. Again, I'm not really 100% sold on where my Germans are going to be setting up in defense. Sorry, the scenario on the SSRs. So EC are wet with the mild breeze from the east at start. Now it doesn't note the cloud conditions. So according to E3 rule, unless it says otherwise in the SSR, it's always considered clear. So there's no clouds. It does not give the status of the moon, which is really only useful for when rolling up your initial NVR anyways, your night visibility range. So we don't really care about what the moon status is anymore. And we've already discussed the terrain SSRs and the ECs. So looking at the night rules, for those of you not familiar with night rules, it can be daunting to say the least, with addition of cloaking, jitterfire, straying, star shells, who can use it, who can't use it, defender being unable to move until certain conditions are met, extra hip status for your units as a defender, and that kind of thing. It makes it, as I said, daunting to say the least. I'm not going to go into the night rules a lot, just because, again, there's probably 3 pages maybe in the rule book that cover that, and maybe even 4, and you really have to read them yourself to get a full grasp of it. So you'll see how they play out when we actually go through it. Hopefully, Dave's never done night, as far as I'm aware. I've only done a couple night missions, and which doesn't give us a strong background on night, so we're probably going to be making some mistakes, but we're going to try and eliminate those as much as possible, and we'll just take our time going through the rules, making sure that we get everything as correctly as possible, so that if you've never done night and you've seen this video, that we don't give you the wrong information. So regarding night, what I will talk about is what's in the SSR. So the NVR is 3 hexes, which means any unit you can see 3 hexes away. Anything moving, anything beyond 3 hexes, you cannot see. Now, this NVR could change as part of the wind change dial. It can go all the way down to 0. It can go up. I think the maximum is 6 or something like that. Depending on what you roll, it could be really good for a defender or really bad for a defender. Obviously, depending, the lower your visibility, the better it is for the attacker, because it lets him get right on you before you can do anything. If you're at level 0, for example, you cannot see outside your own hex. There could be a whole parade happening here in N7, but if you're at 08, you couldn't see them until they start shooting, and then they become illuminated, and then you can start doing different things as well. So the Canadians are the attacker, and the Germans are the scenario defender, which kind of seems obvious, but this has a play in the way the rules are written, defining their certain roles and their limitations, especially for the defender. Some of that I will cover. The majority squad type for the Canadians is stealthy, and for the Germans is normal. Now, this really plays into things like straying, as well as ambush, because Canadians are stealthy. They'll get a -1 on their ambush die roll. If they enter a location already concealed, that's going to be a combined -3. And if you throw in a -2, you could have a -5 to your ambush die roll. And with night, the ambush difference only has to be 2 or more. During daytime operations, it's a 3 by the rules. By nighttime, it's only a 2. So a two number difference in the ambush die roll determines success or failure. And there's so many negatives applied to the Canadians as it is, that it's more than likely they're going to win all the ambush die rolls, or at least they should, again, barring bad dice rolls. The Germans, for their part, are normal, which basically means they're the standard, so there's no negatives or positives to them. Now, this is going to be augmented by the fact that there's 3 conscript squads. Conscript squads are lax, which, aside from impacting their close combat abilities, again, adds a +1 to their ambush die roll, makes it that much easier for the Canadians to attack. It also affects things like straying if they were ever to move, and they stray so much easier, and potential for jitter fire and all the rest of that kind of stuff. Again, some of that I'm not going to cover because it's too much. So let's look at the night rules that apply to the defender. So I'm allowed to set up 3 squads hip based on 25% of the 9.5 squad equivalents, and that's rounded up. So it's like 2.3 something or other. So it's going to be 3 squads and anything stacked with them that can be set up hip, which is really good. So I can occupy these stone buildings with an LMG, maybe the medium, maybe throw the A1 in as well. Although I'll probably leave the A1 unhipped just so that he can run around and activate units. As part of the thing which we're going to cover next, which is freedom of movement. So Chapter E 121 is freedom of movement, and basically all units are set up on board with a no hip, with a no move counter as a defender. And you sit on this counter and you're unable to move until some conditions are met. Things like the attacker losing an ambush, or a fire attack that happens for whatever reason. I'm able to get some shooting in, or Dave jitter fires while he's walking. Then the jig is up, as it were, and the A1 can run around and start activating units. Because you cannot move or advance until you're off the snow move counter, you can still fire. And you can defend yourself, obviously, but you just can't move around. So it's harder to respond as a defender to the attacker's movements if you're unable to move around, again, until at such point that you become free. One thing to consider at nighttime as well is ELR. So the Germans set up with an ELR of 2, which is the lowest you can have, I think. Contrast that with the Canadians, who have an ELR of 4, really. So now Scenario Defender are usually 1 less ELR than normal, so normally it'd be a 3 around the June 1944 time frame, which is probably correct. But because it's nighttime, it's actually dropped down to a 2. So I could see a lot of these 447s, once they start breaking, actually descending to conscript status. And conscripts, once you break, exceeding your ELR, you become disrupted. But again, just makes it that much more difficult for the Germans to act accordingly if your units become weaker and weaker. So that is the ELR loss that you have to be aware of for playing night missions. Look at the general conditions, just to summarize briefly what I was saying. The Canadians come in from 3 directions: the left, the top, or the right. I can see them following the roads or their streams to avoid straying. Straying has a problem because you start heading off in different directions. It takes it that much harder to get to where you're going. Following tree lines, following roads, following streams is a much better way of doing it. Of course, from a defender standpoint, that gives me likely avenues to cover, so I can focus less on covering open areas, and I can worry more about where things are coming along streams, and roads. Something to consider. I've got 15 building locations I have to defend, but I've only got 9 squads and a gun. So I have to be wary of where I can have the best chance of succeeding. Because of all these buildings down here, I think this one's going to be the one to fight for. This one's I can afford to give up. Just because of I can't defend both. I just don't have the numbers. With him being able to enter in close combat, probably cloaked, being stealthy, I'm going to lose troops and to little to no gain. So I'm going to probably put a token force up into the west just to guard this area, maybe a lot of dummy counters. But I think majority of my troops are going to be in this area. Hopefully I get some advance notice and I can start shooting him as he approaches. But again, this game's going to be up in the air because he can come at me from 3 directions. He's got leaders, which means he's going to be moving 6 at a time. He's coming in cloaked, as I said, and my NDR is 3, which is pretty standard. However, with every wind change die roll, there's a chance for it increasing or decreasing, and if it goes too bad, then it makes my life that much harder. I'm not sure what else to talk about in this one. It's going to be interesting. As I said, we have minimal experience with night. I've got a couple more under my belt than Dave has. I don't think he's done any, maybe 1. But it's been so long ago that we've forgotten a lot of the rules. So we're going to take this one as slow as we can. So there's going to be a lot of edits in the video as we confer with the rules. We want to make sure we don't make any mistakes. And if you're new tonight and you watch this, hopefully it's something useful you can apply and we've done things correctly. If not, it'll be pointed out in the comments as it always has been. All right, guys, that's going to be enough for me for this initial recce. Hopefully it's made some sense, and it's kind of a rambling. I didn't really have a format for this one. It's more or less just as it came to me, I was going to go through it. But hopefully you'll get something out of it for this scenario 101, throwing down the gauntlets. And we'll see you guys in the next video. Bye-bye.